We're going to welcome Adam, who is one of our three builders from the kind of fall winter builders contest. Let me just remind you guys, if you have forgotten or didn't see how that contest was structured, we basically invited submissions. We got dozens of awesome template concepts, awarded 3 grants to Brad, Adam, and Kat, and worked together for a couple months. And all their templates are available now in the community, and we've been doing a workshop every couple weeks to have them share their template and also a little bit of their process and how they think about personal finances. So Adam, again, is the second of the three to present, and then Kat will be presenting in a couple weeks. So what's the goal of the Builders Workshop? First is to help you solve maybe a personal finance problem that's important to you. I'm sure a lot of people are interested in learning how they can track recurring expenses a little better. Also to meet and sort of hear from a community member like yourself. So we'll learn a little bit about kind of Adam's approach to personal finance. And finally, just to have an opportunity to come together as community members in personal finance and interested in using Tiller. So the agenda real quick, we already have done most of the introduction. Adam's gonna walk through and do a demo of his template and show us how it works. I'm going to ask him just a couple questions afterwards about kind of the whole process of making it, and then please submit your questions in the Q&A, and Heather will kind of moderate, and we'll do those. Hopefully we'll have about 15 minutes at the end to do that. Final 2 reminders are, again, Kat, you can see at the bottom, Kat will be presenting her travel planner, which helps you plan for travel expenses and budget and track them on the February 17th. And also, Heather does a really good job at getting these out, usually next day, as recordings in the community. And so if you miss anything or want to review or share it with a friend, it'll be there for you. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Adam, who's going to share his screen. If I can find my mouse. Oh no, my mouse is not appearing. Is there a good way to, here maybe? There we go. All right, Adam, go ahead.
You may want to unmute if you're muted, Adam.
Yeah, I was just getting there. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen okay. I guess say something in chat if you can't. But what I have here is kind of a watered down what your Tiller sheet might look like. And I'll go through the process of installing the recurring expenses thing now. So if you have the Tiller Community Solutions already installed, we just go to Open Sidebar here.
Sometimes it runs a little slower when you're zooming. We've seen at least.
Oh, okay.
I'm not used to seeing it run this slow or open up this slow.
Okay, I just did this last night.
Yeah.
Just to make sure we're.
There it is.
It's a Zoom
we're all
thing.
good. All right, and you can just search for it.
I love the plug of the search feature. I love that feature, but I'm not sure everyone uses it.
I'm a very I don't memorize how to do things. Like if there's a way that I can search, it's easier. So going down here, we just add to spreadsheet. I should just take a moment here. And I think the nice thing about the recurring thing here, now we're done with this, so we can close this. By default, it just comes in and it's already looking at your transaction data. And so you don't have to do a ton, but there are some settings that you can do to kind of tune it the way that you want. So by default, you're going to see this view that's more limited. And what it's pulling in here are the transactions that it believes are recurring expenses. So it's looking things like how frequent the transaction is, what the average price is. So if it's typically the same price, we make the assumption that it's probably a recurring transaction, and if it's happening every 30 days. And so it does give a score to the transactions. And so you see these ones at the top are the ones that are at that sort of monthly cadence, and the average is going to be pretty close to the average transaction, be pretty similar. And then down below, you're going to see other transactions that are reoccurring, but maybe they're not quite at the exact frequency that we'd see a normal reoccurring transaction. So at this point, we can dig into some of the other things that are here. First, if you click on this plus thing, you'll be able to see a transaction viewer. And so we can see, like, for instance, AT&T in here. If we want to like actually dig in and see those AT&T transactions, we can click on that and we can actually see each monthly transaction here in detail. And so you can see, like, in November, it was a little bit more than normal. And so there were probably some surcharges or something that month. But again, on average, it is that sort of $65 price point. And so, this sheet has pulled this in as a reoccurring thing. So that's a nice feature. So that way you don't have to go into your other sheet and like, look through years of data to try to find the transactions it's looking at. If you need to configure farther, you can then expand over here, and then there's a couple settings here. One setting is how many days to include. And so right now we put a cap on it by default at 1,000 days, but you can go more or less depending on what your needs are. And the idea here being is if you had a tiller sheet with just years and years of transactions, if it got too bogged down, we wanted to be able to just limit the data so that it was still usable in case it just was too bad. And then the other thing is that score. So this score you see here on the far left, that's basically a percentage. And so if you want to see things that are maybe less likely to be a recurring expense according to the algorithms here, and you want this to be a little bit more lenient, or whatever, you can adjust the score and it'll pull more or less items in to this list on the left. Again, that's just kind of a personal preference on what you want to consider reoccurring. And then kind of everything after this is just sort of the data behind the scenes. In this area, there's nothing we'd ever need to mess with here. And so it's there though, I guess, if you expand it and want to look at it. But really we're pulling this data in here, and then these controls are using this data to kind of present what we really want to show on the left-hand side. Yeah, and then the only other thing that is also worth noting is on the very far right, we also do the indirect lookups here. And so if for some reason your transaction sheet is not called transactions, or these columns have been renamed, you can rename them here and it will pull in the correct fields. Most people shouldn't ever have to deal with that, but it's here in case your sheet is customized to the point where these names are not what they are.
That's interesting, Adam. I never think of using it that way. I just assume that the sheets are standardized that way, but the columns might be in different places.
Yeah. And maybe that is the more common use case. But yeah, anyways, so this is it. And really, for me, it's just a tool that I can look and see where that money's coming in month to month, and I can make decisions on budgeting in the future, deciding, hey, I've spent, this much money on AT&T, like, is there a better option out there? Or I know for me, that's really helpful for me and my family when we do the budget planning.
Yeah, I think for us too, especially those streaming subscriptions, you keep adding them and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I haven't used that one in months. And here you'll see it present. Can you talk us through the blacklist feature? Because that's pretty cool.
Oh, right. Thank you for reminding me of that. So, there may be a situation where, like, Trader Joe's, for instance, we know that that's just, we go shopping. It doesn't really count as a recurring expense. So the nice thing here is in this blacklist, and you just fill them, starting in row 10 and just filling down, you can just paste those names right in here and it will take it out of this list. So, if you have these things that it is identifying as reoccurring that really aren't, then you can get them out of the list. And that way you're really just focusing on the reoccurring things. Yeah, thank you for that reminder, Randy.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm realizing maybe that area should have been green, kind of in retrospect. Maybe that's
Oh,
the
yeah, maybe
first.
it's worth updating the template there.
Yeah. So can you just tell us? This is super cool. I installed it a couple weeks ago in my personal sheet, and just there were a few surprises that it helped me find. Can you talk us through, you hinted at it, but like the whole recurring score, like that's a pretty complex calculation. And like, not just let us know how it works, but if you could, like, what would you do to make it sort of better, or let it, or what would a user want to think about in terms of maybe fine tuning it, or doing something a little bit different?
Yeah, so if you expand all the data here, you'll see the frequency in terms of the days. So how basically how many transactions are from the beginning to the end. So it's not perfect in that sense that, you know, if you had a transaction in January of last year and then you had 11 in December, it's going to say, oh, that looks like a monthly situation. Um, so that would be a potential improvement, but it is looking at like on average how many how far apart the transactions are. Um, and then we're looking at the standard deviation of the charge. And so, you know, if on average the charge is $15, you know, and then that these current transactions are around that same price, then we're going to assume that, you know, it doesn't deviate very much from the average. And so that it's going to have a higher score because of that. And so we calculate these scores here, and then that's when it's brought over to that spark line over on the far left. Um, you know, this is a pretty kind of simplistic take on it. You know, there could be more interesting things that are done with, you know, potentially transaction count and the like length of data shown. But this was, it felt like a good way to get like the data there. So yeah, I think the nice thing about this being a community solution though is you all can see these calculations and everything, and you can fine tune it to what works for you. So, you know, if you want to dig in and dig into the formulas, they're all there, which is nice.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. I think you left some hooks there. Like, can you show up in those header rows, kind of how those array formula scoring functions work? Yeah, so essentially that's kind of what are generating the scores. There's ones in there's sort of formulas like that in those other columns as well. And it'd be cool if there were some discussion in the community around some refinements, or maybe even other contributors to the scoring that made it more, improved it. Um, all right, cool. I think Heather, should we cut over to Q&A? Do you think?
Yeah, sure. There's one question in there right now. If others have questions, please get them in the Q&A. Be happy to answer them. So Wes asks, he says he joined late. Are you going to address how to post these recurring transactions to the transaction sheet as pending manual transactions to match later? Not sure if that is a workflow that was taken into consideration with this or not, but maybe either one of you could speak on that.
From my point of view, I'm just looking at the transactions that it can get from the sheet, and it's not checking any status of any sort there. So at the moment, it's definitely not doing that. But when it does bring in the transactions, it does do some things like count the number of transactions. And so if that status is somewhere on that row, it should be able to look into that and say, oh, this is a disqualifier for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think Wes, I'm not sure if you're speaking specifically of the community solution add-ons, manual transaction flag for reconcile features, but it doesn't sound like that is being factored into this recurring expensive sheet at all. Is that accurate, Adam?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think this is probably intended to be a little bit more backward looking, and sort of to flag things that maybe you didn't know you're paying for, or maybe somewhere where you want to reevaluate whether you're getting good value out of something. Mm-hmm. There are definitely some sort of threads and templates in the community that are around kind of forecasting expenses, and I think there maybe are some opportunities to sort of integrate or at least take the data from mm-hmm. this and sort of use that and push it forward out into the future. But I don't think that's there now or here now.
Awesome. All right. We had a comment from somebody in the chat, but if other folks have questions, go ahead and get those into the Q&A. Carl says the open architecture of Tiller and all the add-ons is what I love about Tiller. It is so easy to work with the data compared to other tools. Thank you for keeping formulas accessible. Yeah, for sure, Carl. I mean, that's that's what we strive to do. And that's what's awesome about the community too. And this builder challenge was, having community members build things, make it accessible, share how they built it. So thanks for that comment there, Carl.
Cool. Maybe Adam, while we wait and see if there are additional questions, you could just tell us a little bit about, like, obviously this template does like one of the jobs of your personal finance spreadsheet. What are the other kind of important jobs that your personal spreadsheet does for you? Like, how do you use it essentially?
Yeah, I'm probably a bad budgeter. I'm not like at times in my life, my family did this sort of envelope method type of thing. But for us, we're more of a reactionary thing. And so, like you said, we can see these recurring expenses and see if we feel like we're getting the value out of it that we're putting into it. And the nice thing is you can see, oh, I've had 12 transactions at $30 each. Like, am I getting that much love out, enjoyment out of this service or whatever? And so for me, we look back on the year and say, oh, this is how we spent our money this year. Does that still feel right? And so that's how we really use Tiller. And I was telling Heather this earlier. I also really love the daily emails. Just for me, being able to easily like see the transactions that are coming in, with all of the I feel like, every other month you get an email from some company saying, oh, our database was hacked or whatever. And it's nice to know that those transactions are my transactions and not someone else's.
Yeah, that feature, Heather, was kind of one of the very early features of Tiller, and it probably deserves some new love, but we often hear that it's very popular. I'm a similar budgeter to you. I kind of want to sort of forecast and then track, but we don't like kind of monitor, to hit at the end of the month. But I want at the end, I want some record of like, just to sort of go back and be like, wait, what happened? Or, was this what we expected? But similar to that. How about, can you tell us a little bit about like how you had this idea, and then also kind of what it was like to build it out? Like, were there any surprises or kind of things you learned through that process?
And then we have one question after that.
Okay. So it was kind of funny. A buddy of mine was messaging me, and he's like, he's super adverse to having any sort of recurring expense. Like, if he can help it, like he'll borrow his in-laws like Disney Plus logins and things like that. Like, they will do everything they can possibly do to not have a recurring expense. And he's like, how many recurrings do you have? And as I log into my Tiller spreadsheet, I start looking at things and I'm like, oh, this is easy enough, but it could be easier to like find these things, right? Like, they have a common description, they have a common amount. Like, I should be able to programmatically figure this out. And so that was kind of the impetus for doing this. And then, I saw the builder competition thing coming out. I'm like, oh, I should totally pitch this idea. So anyways, that was the impetus behind it. And I'm a software developer by trade. And so I look at formulas and things like this, but I don't program in Google Sheets. So for me, there was definitely a learning experience for like the wizardry that Randy and other folks helped me with to like get the sheets in Google to work the way that you want them to. And so I learned a lot about just what kind of work you can do in Google Sheets to really get the data the way you want it. And so like the indirect references stuff was cool, and all the little query formula stuff that you can do, and just how you can like, I didn't know you could use brackets to like select a part of data and make that part of your query. Like, that stuff is just so useful now. And I've started incorporating that into like other little private, tabs I've added to my personal Tiller sheet to, group expenses by description and just see like, who am I spending the most money with, things like that.
It's funny you mention all that, because I remember when we first heard this idea on your sort of proposal, this was something that I think especially Peter, the CEO of Tiller, has kind of been interested in doing for years. And we really didn't think it was super possible without scripts. And so we're like, this guy Adam wants to do this. And we're like, I don't know, that sounds pretty hard. And in terms of wizardry, I remember the first time we met, you're like, this is what I want to do. And I was like, wow, I don't really know if he can pull this off. And then the first draft you actually had some pretty awesome stuff that worked. It was like, 90% the way there. And it was just kind of eye opening just to see that you had managed to, pull it off. It was kind of wizardry that, we were seeing on our end too.
Spreadsheets are magical. All right, let's get this question from Brian. I think I missed it. When is a transaction added to the recurring expenses sheet? The moment it has 2 or more transactions?
Yeah, so that is, it will not include it until it's had multiple, so at least 2. That's correct.
Okay.
Right,
And that is in
the scoring threshold, right?
Oh yes, that's true as well. But it does here in this this R5 column where we see this, it's going to make sure that it has more than one transaction. But yes, what Randy's talking about is this min score here, which is normally defaulted to 0.5. So if it, again, based off of this stuff that we were talking about here, the frequency and the standard deviation, this score, if it doesn't get above that threshold, then it won't be included in the left side at first. But again, if you want to make that, you can change this min score to be lower if you want to include more things in that list.
Cool. Brian also asked, have you thought about sorting or grouping the list by category? Would that be an easy adjustment? Is there a simple way to add and remove sorting and grouping?
So right now it is sorting by the score. If you're looking at this, you can choose to order it by something different. So right now, again, it's sorting by that score by default. But you could sort it. So I'm not pulling in any categories. So there's no categorical sorting at the moment. But if you adjusted kind of what's being pulled in, then you could use it in this sort later. But you could easily by editing this formula in B5, you could sort by the data that's currently on this sheet pretty easily. So transaction count, total amount, frequency, that kind of stuff would be there and available for you.
Yeah, that's a good point on customization. I think if you did want to pull in the categories, probably over in that hidden area Adam showed over to the right, you could add a column there that did a category lookup. It's a little tricky with that because, for example, if you categorized, let's just say like BP inconsistently, it actually might go to multiple values. So you'd probably want to do like a VLOOKUP and find just the first match and assume that all the rest are the same. But once you had a column that did that, like Adam said, you could basically integrate that into the sorting criteria and what's displayed on the left as a customization.
Good question though. And I try to follow up with Terry in the chat, but she mentioned that she's only getting columns 1 to L. And I'm missing the content to the right. It might just be that grouping. Maybe you can just demonstrate how to do that. Unhide that group, the grouped columns, maybe.
Yeah, so this transaction viewer is in this little plus sign in this gray bar. And then everything else over here was, let me put it back to the way that it was. So if you select some columns and you tell it to hide those columns, you'll see a little black chevron arrow type of thing here. And if you click on that, it'll, if I can get to it, there you go. It'll expand out those things. And it's also worth noting that column B is also hidden by default. So, you'll see these 2 black arrows here as well. And that's just to hide the formula it's brought in, but you can expand it and see that score there if you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's probably what it was. I try to explain that, but it's nice to have a demo. So it looks like we have another question here regarding the blacklist or exclusion feature. Is it possible to filter out multiple expenses containing a specific keyword in the description? For instance, I have recurring Vanguard investment transactions all ending with buy, reinvestment, etc. How do I remove these without adding each unique stock fund transaction to that exclusion list?
Yeah, unfortunately, it has to match exactly the blacklist as it is today. So there's no like fuzzy matching at the moment. That'd be an interesting addition to add to this, but I didn't get that far.
Is
But
it
yeah,
cool.
so
possible, Adam,
it
that
does have
worked
to
with
match word
wildcards?
for word, like letter for letter. What's that, Randy?
Is it possible that that worked with wildcards? I can't remember if that was just kind of part of that query feature. Like, what if you put in, I'm trying to see something there that is a couple times. Like if you put in like star, I'm just trying to see.
Co-op. Co-op's
Is
a good
co-op in
example.
there?
Like co-op, community co-op, French broad food
Oh yeah,
co-op. Is that
yeah.
what you
Just
mean?
put in like, well, if you put in just probably co-op, that might delete both of those. Did it? No.
Case
Oh, it
sensitive?
is. What if you put in star right up before the C?
Like this?
Yeah. Ah,
Is it case sensitive?
maybe.
Because it's a capital C. No, it
That's
doesn't
too
look.
bad.
Yeah.
Well, how about one more thing? Put a star after the P2.
Okay.
We're doing live QA
Gosh,
here.
I could
love it.
swear that maybe it has to do with somewhere. Is that all in the description? Is that in that R5 cell where that is?
Let's see here. This is O11, O10 and
It's
beyond.
probably that part right
Yeah,
in front.
so it is using this filter function here.
But I wonder a little bit. There's like I think you can change that. I don't know how to do it kind of live, but it's
Yeah.
possible that you do like and not contains instead of not equal to, and it's possible there are. I don't know. There's like a 30% chance that if that were like not contains, that actually that query function works with wildcards. I don't know, and I don't know
that-
exactly
Okay.
what the syntax would be.
Yeah. I find that query language to be so like unintuitive and not contains. It's like, okay, like why can't you just say does not contain? Anyway,
Well,
Well, that didn't work.
sorry.
that's
Like I
everything.
said, it's like kind of a tenuous idea.
All right. Well, I think that was all the questions that we had, and we're pretty close to our time. So unless there's any last minute questions, looks like Terry says, got it, thanks. No content loaded in columns K to the right. Okay. I think she understood the whole grouping thing, so that's good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Adam. It's been great chatting with you and hearing more about how you thought of the solution, how you build it, and then doing some real like digging into the formulas. I love that. Thanks, Randy.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Mhm.
Thanks, Adam, for
For
all the
sure.
hard work, and it was really fun working with you on this. You did a great job.
For sure. All right. Look out for that email from us tomorrow with a link to additional resources in the replay. Have a good one, y'all. See ya.